Okay, what I'm going to cover today is somewhat complex, but it really underscores what you can bump into when a project starts getting big and complicated. And if you bump into problems and can solve them sooner rather than later, that's probably better. Okay, so let's just backpedal a little bit. If we look at any of the shots I've already done, let's grab this one. We have this level, which was in fact the storyboard for the entire show. Okay. One of the issues, it's a small issue, but one of the issues I had was that being a Toonz raster level, it's a TLV file, a single file, which was a half a gigabyte in size, which creates a big memory footprint, and also to archive the project across the network and things like that, it becomes a bit of a time suck whenever you're backing things up. So with that in mind, I took the step of turning the storyboard, rendering it out actually, into a ping image sequence. Okay, so that while the scenes I've done so far are referencing the entire storyboard level, which I think is a good thing, you can kind of jump around in it. I haven't looked into whether that affects the actual memory footprint of Opentoonz at the time you load the scene. Meaning, I think if I just load a scene, like I'll show you, let's load this one. Okay, I think that until I start scrolling through here, see no icon, no icon, no icon. Okay, I think until I actually tell Opentoonz to, and I can hear my fan running and hard drive spinning, I guess so. So I think that Opentoonz doesn't actually load all these images into memory unless there's a reason to. So that's a good thing. Okay. But the greater problem that I had was that I talked about 2 videos ago about using palettes, and I went through some pain keeping the palettes synced. And the conclusion I've come to is that if you're going to try to use a palette, say across projects or across all the scenes in a project, you're dealing with a situation where you've got to maintain the integrity of that data no matter what. And if you watched the previous video, you saw that the process of managing that was a bit on the clunky side. It doesn't really discount the idea of using palettes, but the conclusion I've come to is that if you're going to use the color model, which I think I'm not going to going forward, it would make less sense to be clicking colors in the palette and then having to deal with, well, what if they change a little bit? And that will always be a problem. If the master color scheme changes, that does present potential problems. If you've got a live link from the palette to all your projects so that when you reload a scene, I keep saying projects when I mean scenes, so that when you load a scene it automatically updates, that would be a good thing. In practice, it would be better to be firm about what your color scheme is. Why? Because then, instead of even messing with palettes, you would do what I was doing previously on the anime project, which worked pretty well, which is the color scheme for any given character is to simply pull up an image with that character in it like this and just use your eyedropper to sample the colors. Okay? It's effectively no slower to do it that way, and in my view, it's actually kind of a lot more reliable. The only thing you lose is kind of the live link going forward that says, what if I'm 75 scenes into my projects and then I change my character's skin color? Well, Opentoonz, if you use the palettes correctly, and not only that, but as I think Darren T commented in the previous video, using the studio palette can kind of solve that problem where you have a live link to your palette that works across your scenes and automatically updates as you make changes to it. I investigated that, studied it out, blah, 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 came to the conclusion that basically it's not worth it. That it makes more sense to simply be firm about what your color schemes are. Sorry about that, guys. And live with it. That's actually what I'm thinking. So, why? The problem is, what you find is that when you are depending on your software to manage something like that, your data, which let's call your palette a really big complicated piece of data. Okay, so now you got to keep that data completely synchronized with a bunch of different files that are referencing that data. Where I found it was becoming a bit of a problem was that essentially the scene is referencing the storyboard. So the scene was referencing the toon's raster level, and the toon's raster level was referencing the palette. And so you've got two steps of indirection. My contention is that that is basically a disaster waiting to happen. It's bad data management. That's where your data is too tightly coupled to your overall project, and it's going to introduce not only errors but also data management burdens that constantly need attention. And I did find that to be the case in these first half dozen scenes, that I was constantly having to go back and resave the palette and back and forth and back and forth. Okay, so having converted the entire storyboard into a standard raster level, so now what you have is you've got the storyboard, which I can look at in my fast stone image viewer. I can jump through and see the latest version of these images. And now the question for me becomes this: can I have my cake and eat it too? Is there a way to have all the man, I'm like joking on my words today. Is there a way to have the benefit potentially of, say, being able to do ink and paint in Krita, where I could maybe mix it together with its background, have many layers of stuff, yada yada yada. But then the problem you run into is where Krita falls apart. And here's a scene I did yesterday in Krita. Where Krita bogs down and falls apart is in animation. Now, if you're doing very strict cell animation, in other words, frame by frame animation, and you want to do all your own tweens manually, fine. You can do that in Krita. Without a doubt, what I've learned is that I never get as good results doing it that way as I get in Opentoonz, typically using the plastic tool, because what happens is you have a situation like this where you've got a character with multiple heads, just basically different head shapes, and what's actually happening here is that I'm sorry, that's the wrong plastic tool, is that the plastic tool is managing the transition between pieces of the image. So that's kind of a cool way to work, because what it suggests, just as a concept, would be, you could go into Krita, for example, and maybe I draw a character here, and then I just copy, let's say, their face or their body or their eyes, whatever it is, to a different part of the cell, and then it's actually surprisingly quick and easy to set it up in Opentoonz so that you just manage switching between them with the plastic tool. I'm not here to endorse that technique. It's basically a kludge, and I would say it's been a good experiment that I'll probably use less going forward. But because basically the frame by frame animation in Opentoonz is fine, and the animate tool and the plastic tool working together really give you a lot of flexibility. And all those capabilities aren't present in Krita. So what's Krita good at? Well, Krita is good at creating really complex layered up image files that allow you to really fine tune your shot and your scene, and it handles the blending of layers really, really well. Whereas in Opentoonz, that's relatively clunky, because if you wanted to have blending modes, for example, you would have to do it through the schematic like I did here, where you've got one layer that's going through an overlay blending mode to make a modification to the entire shot, but the only time you can see it is when you either preview or have your your shot open in another window, you know, in the combo viewer that's permanently in preview mode. So you can work that way. But again, my question was, can I have my cake and eat it too? Is there a way? And I think I figured out a way. Here it is. Let's say the shot I'm getting ready to work on right now is actually this one. Okay, so what happens is, I'll go, I guess that doesn't help. You've got your characters peeking into this cave, and Luca is saying, hey, we'll be safe here until the soldiers move on. Okay. Well, with this way of working, sorry again, I need to drink some water or something. With this way of working, I can take this image from the storyboard. I don't have to load a whole Opentoonz TLV file, and by the way, that's a proprietary format that doesn't play well with any other software anyway. I can take this individual cell, bring it into Krita, do all the finishing work, which I've done here, okay, and again, my preference would be to not animate in Krita. I'd rather get all the layers and stuff in place, but again, what we're looking for is a way to quickly load it up, do ink and paint, get the static image to the level it needs to be, and then how do I get it back into Opentoonz so that I can work with it? Well, here's how. What I learned was that if you save a Krita file in the ORA format, which is the native format of mypaint, okay? What it does is it actually creates a zip file. It's just a zip file, and inside that zip file there's some metadata and a folder that contains all the layers of your image as individual ping files. Okay, that's kind of useful. And it just names it an aura file instead of naming it a zip file. Well, it turns out that Krita does one thing very nice for us, which is that if you save your Krita document image as an aura file, it gives you this little warning that you're going to lose some information when you save it to a to an aura. Okay, I'm just curious what this pop-up is. Okay, and it gives you the ability at the same time to go ahead and save it as a Krita file. Let's do that. Okay, now what that did for me, and I'm going to go to this folder where I've been doing these experiments. Okay, I've got this folder called conversions, and what I did was I saved the aura file. I don't know if it's easy to see here, but here's the aura file I just saved, and right beside it is the Krita file. Now that's kind of cool, because what that means is that I can always get back to the Krita file if I want to make some modifications. But now we've got this aura file, and what it contains is all the layers in my image. Doesn't have blending modes, doesn't have animation, but all the layers are there. What can we do with that? Well, what I did was, this was a pain in the butt to do, but I wrote a fairly lengthy batch file. What does this batch file do? It takes the aura file, renames it into a zip file, and then uses 7zip or 7z.exe to unpack the zip file into its constituent contents, get rid of the stuff I don't need, and move things around to where they need to be so I can actually work with them. So when I run this batch file in this folder, so I save my aura file into this folder, and now I have both the aura file and the Krita file. I run this batch, I just did it, and what it did was it created a folder that's got the same name as the aura file did. And inside of that, you've got this merged image, which I need to drag this down here. So you've got the full-size merged image, which is maybe useful sometimes. And then in this folder, you've got all your individual layers. Okay? Let's preview this. So I can toggle through the different layers and see the pieces that comprise that complex image that we saw in Krita. Now things are getting very interesting, because if I create a new scene in Opentoonz, now I can actually grab this batch of files, drag them in here, and Opentoonz asks me if I want to load them or import them. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to always load them. Why? If I load them, you see it loaded up all the layers. And now if I want to, what I was going to say is, if I load them, then I say, well, what if my background needs a little more contrast or a little more tonality? Okay, let's save this. Let's save all, and I'm going to call this 0772. Let me make sure I got my file name right, just to be safe. Yes, 0772. So I'm going to save that as 0772. Boom. Okay. Now, if all works as advertised, watch what's going to happen here. Now I'm going to go in here in Krita, and there's my sky. Now let's just say, for the sake of argument, what I want to do is make an adjustment to the sky. Okay? I want to kick up the contrast, let's say. Okay? And just to be fair, I'm going to also make an adjustment that's a little more obnoxious, changing the hue to a really rich purple. And the reason I'm doing that is so it's easy to see the changes that took place. Now, because I just saved this in Krita, it's already ready to save it as an aura file, so same situation as before. And we're going to find out in real time if this works. So now what happens is I just rerun the batch file, and it asks me if I want to rewrite or overwrite stuff. I do. Well, guess what? Now I would bet you some amount of money that if I now reload this scene, look at that. I've got my updated background color. Okay? Now the truth of the matter is I don't really like that background color. So I'm going to hit the undo. I do like the increased contrast though. So for my purposes, file, load scene, boom. And now we've got our increased contrast. So as I said, essentially I do have my cake and eat it too. What am I trading away in this scenario? What I'm trading away is the ability to use the Toonz raster level, and essentially the only core benefit that you're risking in this situation is the ability to change your colors on the fly. You know, if I had something that was colored yellow here, and then but it's on a Toonz raster level, then if I change the color here, it actually updates in real time. What I'm here to tell you is that I'm finding in practice that's not actually that useful that often, because from a workflow standpoint, what you really wanted to do is get your color scheme figured out ahead of time, and everything that's kind of complex from a color standpoint, you really want to figure out when you do it. In other words, when you're painting a background painting, for example. Issues having to do with color are really more likely to come up here. In other words, like what would be an example of that? Well, let's say I add a layer here. I'm going to put it right up. I'm going to put it up top, and let's just use a gradient, like so. Okay, and let's put that in overlay mode. So the concept here is I'm trying to make a tint to my overall image. Okay. Well, it's in the still composed image where you want to get that right. And plus, as a matter of policy, I intend to do normal color correction at the editing stage. So little bits of contrast and that sort of thing are going to be addressed later. So what is the, let's say, the vulnerable data point? The vulnerable data point would be the ability to change colors on the fly vis-a-vis a Toonz raster level. What I'm saying is that's a cool thing to be able to do. It's not a cool thing to have to do. Okay? And by the way, just parenthetically, you do have a way in Krita to address the same type of situation, because you can go, what is it? I believe it is image. Is it image split? No, it's not image split. I'm sorry. It is, I think it's layer. Yeah, layer. In layer split, you can actually do what's called split layer, which will take it'll take a layer that has a bunch of different colors in it, like a character that's been painted, and it will split it up into, it'll actually turn each color into its own layer. Well, why does that almost make more sense if you had to do later adjustments to your character's color? Well, one reason is that generally your policy should be to have your outlines and your paint on separate layers. Okay, and if you do that, then using split layer in Krita is very robust, because you don't have all the anti-aliasing issues that you have if you try to mix your lines and your colors together. So there's a lot of nuance to this in terms of what can sort of go wrong. But on balance, I have to say this is a powerful way to work. Here, really the only probably, the only questionable aspect of the way I'm doing it here would be that I'm not actually updating the storyboard. Okay? And it might not be a bad idea to do so. If I was going to do so, what I would probably do in this case is I would only save what actually matters for the purpose of a scenario in which I might want to reuse this shot, and that would be something like this. Let me see if my original storyboard. Let me drag that in here. I'm just going to drag this into here as a new layer. Okay, so there's my notes, and if I wanted to, I could actually just save this. Oops. I can save this as a ping. And let's see, we're going to go to the extras storyboard. And we're going to go down here to 0772. Boom. And now when we come back here, we see that we've got the updated version of it. Now, if I didn't have the sketch in there, I could actually use these characters. Now, this is a stupid example because it's way more realistic to think in a shot like this that would come up. Where I might want to actually reuse this very same pose of Mel in a completely different shot. But so what does the workflow become in this scenario? It becomes essentially, for me, because remember, my goal was to do this show in reverse, working backwards. I'm not going to edit the show. I'm not giving any concern to editing continuity at this point. I'm treating it like when I shoot a movie, which, you go on the set, you planned your work, you know the shots you need to get, you got your script you're adhering to. It's a disciplined process. So then you get the footage you need, you get back home, you go to edit, and what you find is there's always a way to make it work in the rare instance where it turns out there's a shot you needed that you didn't get. There's always a way to make it work. I'm approaching this the same way. What I'm essentially saying is, look, I planned my storyboard well, so now the job is to make sure I get every one of these shots. So the next step actually makes a lot of sense in Krita, because what I really want to do is drag each shot, as I say, into Krita, preferably, again, you want to have the ability to have multiple levels so that you can have your background and your characters all separate from each other. And I'm not animating. I'm going to get these static shots done, drag them into Opentoonz, and here is where I'll animate. Okay? So it's like, and it's quick to do. I mean, take this, for example. Let's stretch this. This is Luca's silhouette. Okay? So let's just say we want to add some motion now. I actually did it originally in Krita, and it was okay, but this is really a better methodology. I just I create a mesh, boom. I'm going to go build a skeleton. So we'll get the main part of this guy's body. We'll give him his arms, maybe the ability to bend a leg. I'm actually going to do this in reverse. We'll see how that works. You'll see why shortly. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is put a couple bones here and here just to protect the sides of the character, okay? And by the way, if you want to do animation in Krita, do animation in Krita. Let me address that in just a moment after I demonstrate this, okay? So now we've got this skeleton, and what we really wanted to have, which was clunky to do smoothly in Krita, is because you'd have to keep redrawing it and redrawing it. There's a great time to redraw things, but there's also a time to say, you know what, why am I going to be redrawing everything if there's not a good reason to? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to modify my skeleton to move these nodes a little further away. And just to be safe, I'm going to protect that leg right there. Okay, and the reason I did that is so that in my initial pose, I can just bring him down here like this. Okay? And then let's just kind of go up to where he's going to end up. So let's just say this is going to take 1 second. All right. So we'll jump over here to the X sheet so we don't lose our perspective. It's not strictly necessary, but okay. All right. So then 1 second later, what we wanted to do, which would be comparatively clunky in Krita. Okay. So right around here, I want to look at a point. And here, I actually want him to kind of put his hand down. When he points, kind of want him to tilt his head up a bit. You know, and think about this. What I could do is go like this. So he sort of peeks out and then goes up here. And my concept here was that his arm would kind of stretch up a bit. And the reason I did this bone this way is so that it could actually look like his knee is kind of stepping up, right? And you could even put a key in between where, because it's silhouette, you can sort of get away with this. Okay, and we'll hide that, and let's just see what it looks like. Okay, so the initial, this looks stupid, this initial bit of business. So I'm going to just take those keys out and let Opentoonz do the hard work of, yeah, he says, this'll work. We can hide here until the soldiers are gone. Look at that. Easy peasy. File, save. And in addition to all that, if I go back in the drawing mode and look at this single frame and I say, well, this is a little bit messed up. Let's go right here and we'll sample the black. And let's go ahead and sort of finish out where his foot would be. We never see his foot, so we don't actually need to delineate his foot. Okay, and now I hit save all. We'll go back here, look at the overall shot, see if it's better. It is. And if I'm not mistaken, I haven't actually, I'm going to rearrange my folders here, so I'm having to jump around a little bit because I've got the conversion thing going on in this conversion folder. Okay, but if I go back in here, looky there, the updated Luca image on disk. So what has this done for me? It's taken my important data and it's decoupled it from dependence on Opentoonz' ability to manage complex data well. There are some aspects in which Opentoonz does a great job of that. There are more in which it doesn't. I would rather depend on me to manage my data. Okay, so that's the gist. And with that, if the worst case scenario happens and I need to make a complete change to the shot, say to the background or something, which could certainly come up. I give you an example of that. Same situation here. Let's say I go, I'm sorry, B key, and let's say I just want to just strengthen this highlight right here. I got the wrong layer. I'm on the wrong layer. I guess it would be, since it's in front, it would be up top. Duh. Okay. So I say, I just want to strengthen how much these rocks at the face of the cave are picking up the moonlight. And by the way, there's another issue here, is that when I originally did this in Krita, these guys were all casting a shadow into the cave when they rose up. So I would have to recreate that in Opentoonz, but I mean, geez, that's no big deal. Okay, so for the purposes of what I'm doing here, I'm going to just take this guy. We're going to save it as an aura. Open raster. And because my actual because my actual folder placement isn't quite right, I had this off in its own space for experimentation purposes. Now that I've figured out what I'm doing, I'm going to move things around so that these scenes are in their proper places. But in any case, okay, that didn't work. Well, I'm going to cheat in this case. I'm just going to give this a fake name. And you'll see how that's not a big deal. Okay. So now I'm going to go like that. Go in here, grab these images, Control C, and paste them in here, replace them, and now again, when I reload this scene, we get the updated painting. So yeah, I mean, there's some steps, but this seems like a much more robust overall way to work. And another thing I discovered in the process of dealing with all this stuff was that if you want to deal with regular raster levels, mainly because, let's say, you like the ability to really quickly finesse your character with maybe changing the color here and adding some detail, like this, that sort of thing. Okay, the thing that concerned me about that was the fill operation, but what I found was that if you set the max fill to 15 and hit shift when you hit the fill tool, it actually does, on raster levels, a shockingly good job of filling in your areas, and you wind up with a result that looks just as crisp, to me, as the Toonz raster levels do. So anyway, that's it for today. This is it's been a real complex road trying to figure out how to get this all to work nicely, and now that I've done that, I want to be able to just go ahead and get back to to work. So with that, as you guys know, there will be more later. If somebody out there wants to use this same methodology, and by the way, this dummy folder, I can get rid of it this way. Boom. So, and I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. So all my Krita files are backed up here. I don't need this one, obviously. But if somebody wants to use this same methodology so that they can better marry Opentoonz to Krita, let me know and I'll make it available to you. All you actually need is this batch file. And as I say, it's a bit complex. It's not horrible, but it is definitely a bit on the complex side. I won't bore you with the reasons why it's complex. But then you just need to have a Krita-archive folder, an Aura-archive folder, and then you need to have 7-zip. So I use 7-zip portable, which you can get at portableapps.com. So this is 7-zip portable. If you download 7-zip portable, when it installs, it also installs the command line 7z.exe, and you need to take the 7z.exe and 7z.dll and copy them into the folder where you're doing this conversion operation. But with that, I will leave it and take one last glorious look at the gorgeous shot that I just did, and we will, as you know, there will be more later.